live. Hopefully, you can hear me. Let me know if everything sounds good. Hope you guys are doing good on this Saturday morning. Today's going to be an exciting stream. I'm going to be going over or starting my top 50 anime and manga today. So we're going to do numbers 50 through 41, see how long that takes us, and just chat about each series. And I'll kind of wait a few minutes before getting started here. But hope everyone is doing well. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to talk about this. I've talked about doing this for a year now, and I just fell off of streaming randomly, and then came back on. So I just have to do it. Even if it's not perfect the first time, I just really want to start it. Ronan, good to see you. Hi, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Hope everything sounds good here and everything. Last week I didn't stream because I was in Salt Lake City for a book convention. So that was really fun. But now we're back, and streaming will be back semi-regularly. I guess in a couple weeks I'll be out of town again, so I don't know if I'll stream. But other than that, we're going to be going through this series. The goal is to kind of do it every one a week, and then hopefully soon we'll start maybe streaming 2 or 3 times a week. Dragoned. Hello, hope you're doing good. How are you doing? What are you guys watching right now, or what are you guys reading? I watched Wake Up Dead Man last night. That's the new Knives Out Rian Johnson movie. Thought it was really, really good. Really enjoyed it. I think it was better than the second one, which is Glass Onion, but not as good as Knives Out, which is just incredible how well it's done. But I really like the aesthetic of the new one, so y'all should check it out. Also, I've been watching through Mob Psycho for the channel Watch Along, which has been really, really good. I've only seen one episode of Mob before starting it last week, or this week, I guess, and so it's been really fun to watch Mob Psycho. I kind of bounced off of One Punch Man a little bit when it came out, and I kind of talk about that. I've kind of thrown that in the Discord and stuff, but I think Mob's really good, and definitely if it continues at this level, I'm almost done with season 1, which is for this week. Maybe it could have the chance to be a top 50 show next time I do this, but won't be on this list this time. Ronan, I started watching Spy Family again. Very good. I need to catch up to Spy Family. I think I watched season 1. I've seen the movie, but I'm a little behind since then. I don't even know how much is out yet, but Spy Family is just a really fun time. And I feel like it's one of those that got huge praise when it first came out, and then people really hated on it because of that. And it's just it's a really fun, good series. Haven't been watching too much lately, but just finished reading Aoashi a couple days ago. Awesome. Well, I am a big Aoashi fan, and you might see that we'll be talking about that series today. A little foreshadowing explicitly there. But I have not read the manga of Aoashi. I'm an anime only on it. But I really love season 1, and it would be awesome if they make a season 2, but that won't stop me from definitely diving into the manga in the nearish future. I think would be really sweet. But yeah, that's very cool. Have you been reading? Is it Modulo? Is that how you pronounce it? I always read things and never pronounce them, and then I go to pronounce it eventually, and it's always wrong. I still haven't caught up yet. My plan is over Christmas to do that, so in a week or 2 I'll catch up. I still read just the first 3, and so first 3 chapters, I think, and everything I've heard is it's amazing, and a lot of creators that I follow, and people on Twitter who I really agree with their opinions on Jujutsu Kaisen. I have been just it's borderline is good. It's just really hitting all the notes. Have you been reading it, Ronan? And if you have, what have been your thoughts on it? Is that NXRN? I'm watching FMAB for the first time. It's so unbelievably good. I'm very, very happy to hear that. I love Full Metal Alchemist, and specifically FMAB. And yeah, it's just such a great show. We rewatched it on the channel earlier this year. It was, I think, maybe the first watch along of 2025. and it was so fun to revisit the series. It was something that like throughout high school and early into college, it was like, oh, I'm just gonna try to rewatch this like once a year, and now it's like maybe once every handful of years I'll try to go back and watch it because there's just so much good stuff there. So yeah, we'll chat for another minute or two to let people kind of hop in. If any more want to come in, or if you guys are watching anything, any questions for me, and then we'll dive into the series, and I'll kind of go over the kind of plan for talking about each series, and we'll get this list started. I've kind of taken the approach of I always pronounce I never know if um, his how to pronounce his videos, but it's like Alexander. I always just pronounce it Alexander, but he's got some weird letters in there. But for his streams, when he does like lists like this, he just like does it on Word. So I just like kind of threw together just like, what my top 50 is plus, or, like what the number is, what show, and then just like a poster of it. And then I'll talk about it for a little while. Does the thumbnail give a hint to the top 50? It may give some hints. I was kind of like going back and forth, like what should the thumbnail be for these? And so I figured maybe I would throw some hints in there. Maybe as it goes on, I'll play with it a little more and like sidestep. But there's a few hints on the thumbnail this time. Also, is there going to be 5 streams? Yeah, that's the plan. 1 stream a week, maybe missing 1 week for the holidays. But trying to do it just like every weekend, because I feel like trying to tackle too many at one time is just going to like balloon the stream really, really big. And I want time to kind of talk about the series, and also like some of them it's like, man, I haven't seen these in a few years. I remember loving them. I almost need to like have some time to think about them again and stuff. But I'm really excited to talk all these series. So yeah, I guess we can kind of go over. So yeah, how it's going to work is I'm just have a Word doc. I'm just going to go through it and, share it here. We'll talk about each series. I'll kind of give a rundown initially, maybe of when I watched it. Some of them will be really recent. Some of them will be, from when I was a kid, kind of how the stories lived with me, because I do think that's an important piece to this kind of a list. And kind of go over my thought process. And then, I'll talk about what I love about the series, all the things it does good. If I do have any issues, like there is kind of a weird thing when you're kind of talking maybe 30 through 50, where it's like these series are really good. Some people are going to have them in their top 5. Some of them are going to have them in their top 10. Right? Like there's going to be people who like them a lot more even than me. So there might be a reason why, maybe it isn't as high as it could have been, because maybe I haven't, finished it all the way or done all these things. So I'll kind of mention those. I did try to only put shows that I've either seen a very large chunk of, or, a certain amount of. And so there could be some that's like, I've started it, but I just didn't feel comfortable putting it on this list. And so that's going to be kind of the criteria of talking about it. And then how I approach the series is, or the ranking is a mix of, these are my personal favorites, like they've impacted me, or, they stay with me. But that's not the only criteria. Like I do want to give a lot of leeway to what I see as the quality of the show. And, I'm always interested in shows, with interesting ideas or interesting approaches to structure or character, right? Like there's all these things that it could have. And so I don't want this just to be the first 5 anime that I've ever watched, right? And I also don't want it to not reflect my personality. So that's kind of an in-between in terms of criteria of, I genuinely think these series are amazing. And then some maybe will get higher because I am a little nostalgic for them. And some will be, higher because I just think they're the best written thing, out there, for an example. But yeah, we can kind of dive into it. Let's pull it up here. So starting at number 50, I have Aoashi, which is so funny, Dragon, that you just finished reading it. But Aoashi, it's a soccer series or a football series. Are anime movies included in this ranking? They're not. I would love to do an anime movie list down the road. I definitely would like to do that. So if you guys enjoy these streams, let me know if you want that in the future. So I'm just focusing on series and, of course, manga. There's definitely some series that I've read both of. I'll talk about, oh, I think the manga is better here. I think the anime is better. And definitely there's a little more anime on the entire list than manga. But back to Aoashi. It's a soccer story about a kid who kind of gets discovered to join this club. He plays as a striker, and he's very good in his small town, but then he kind of shows up to this academy where there's players who are a lot better than him, but he's still very good. And it really challenges our understanding of what a striker should be, and it really kind of unearths some of the narrative tropes that you come to expect from these kinds of series, and that comes through in the twist in the middle of the first season. I've only read the first season, so this is the type of show that when I read the manga, I could easily see jumping up the rankings, and maybe I put it at 50 a little bit on potential too, and kind of knowing how much people love the manga. Read with Jules, hi, good to have you here. And so yeah, Aoashi, I read it or watched it about this time last year for the watch along, and it was one of the sports anime that I wanted to throw in. I love sports anime, and I think specifically what this series does really, really well is it follows a lot of, especially the first handful of episodes, like 10-ish episodes, follows a lot of the very classic sports anime structuring and tropes that you come to expect of a player who's good, who works hard, who's obsessed with scoring, who maybe is physically not the most gifted player. Like, he's definitely limited. He's not very tall. He's not super technically gifted. I'm sure the manga might not be for everyone, but it feels great. Yeah, I'm really excited to read it. Like, I've seen some panels of some moments where I'm like, oh, I just like want to get there. But yeah, so the structuring of this series, like, it kind of starts out where like I kind of get what's going on here. One of the really cool things that I think it does early on in the story is how his relationship with his mom and the relationship and difficulty of sending their kid to this facility, but not necessarily having the money to do so. That's like a huge, huge element in sports, and this really tackles it well, which is in the biggest sports, it costs a lot of money. Even a sport like soccer, a sport like basketball, you got to send your kids to either these facilities or send them traveling every weekend, and it's not just like equipment. Like, you think of the most expensive sports being something like golf or something, where it's like the actual equipment to even step on a course is so expensive. But even just like sending your kid to an academy to play soccer is really difficult. And the kind of difficulty that and drama that comes out of that is a big part in the first half of that season. And in a way that's like really cool, I think, because it is tackling the realities of what it would actually mean to play as a star player, or try to, work your way up and be like a very, very good player at a really high level. And so I think Aoashi does that really well. The characters are a little hit or miss. Like, the main character, I think, can be a little grating. And some of the characters are like good. I wouldn't put the cast up there as so far, at least in the first season, as this is an all-time great cast for sports anime. Like, the best sports anime have 10 out of 10 casts, and maybe this isn't quite there yet after the first season, but it is only one season, and I know the manga is really well regarded from the people who've gotten through it, and really overall it is that there is kind of this twist, and it challenges the perspective of the main character without kind of spoiling what that twist is, in a way that really makes the series blossom into something different. And so that comes halfway through the first season, and it's a really bold and challenging choice, and one that really, really works. And the more you think about it, you're like, oh, what a great choice that was to tackle the story, in that way. And so, yeah, really, really loved Aoashi. I've thought about it a lot over the last year. Like, I wasn't really sure when I first finished it because it is my overall for sports anime, like a lot of them I've watched within the last handful of years. They're not the series that I watched 10, 15 years ago. But this one has really actually stuck with me in a way that I didn't necessarily expect, especially after those first issues. Some personality issues make sense when you remember they're teens from different backgrounds under high pressure to perform. Yeah, and that's like what makes the story so good too, isn't it? Like, yeah, maybe some of the characters don't stand out in the way that I'd like, but they all really do tackle that the pressure that you're talking about of they're trying to work their way up at the academy. They're trying to go up and play at a higher level for their team. And so every game is, if you do not perform, like, you might get demoted because we want someone who has actual, potential to fill that role. So there's so much pressure in every single match, even when it's a practice match or there's not actually pressure in terms of the team's success. There's huge pressure in every single game for each player to perform for the potential of their careers. And that's really cool. And I really enjoy that with Aoashi. So I'd highly recommend it. If you like sports anime, it's really, really good. And if you're not vibing with the first 5 to 10 episodes, just give it a couple more. I'd give it a little over halfway through the season. I can't remember the exact episode that the kind of twist is enacted. But yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Aoashi is. And so strongly recommended. It comes in at number 50 for me, for my favorite anime and manga, and one that I could definitely see rising a little bit. So moving down to 49, we've got an old classic here, Elfen Lied. So Elfen Lied is a mid 2000s anime that's kind of become the how should I put it, the poster child for edgy anime. It is this really dark, mature series that when I first came across it, and I think when a lot of people first come across it, it is really challenging and exciting for the kind of media that you've probably been experiencing beforehand. It's just more mature in terms of the ways that it'll show violence. Of course, it has that iconic, first episode where the main character breaks out of a facility and just is killing people, and we don't know how. People are just like dying and getting cut and split in half around her, and she's just like naked leaving this facility, and people are, no amount of guns, no amount of whatever can stop her, and she escapes. And it's like such a gripping kind of sequence, and one that really has taken a life of its own even beyond the show. And so it's a series that I really, really have a soft spot for. And I think a lot of people who, watched it in the mid 2000s, or I think I actually watched it probably in the early 2010s when I was in high school. It just it was stepping into a new world that, because it was like the first kind of show that indulged in violence so objectively, or it really indulges in a way that you just don't necessarily have access to, and so that's some of the appeal, right? Like it's the show that really positioned itself as this gateway into more mature anime, and so you go on to watch these other titles after you kind of watch Elfen Lied, and Elfen Lied's just accessible because you're like, oh, there's so much violence, this is awesome, just like this girl is just killing people, but there is some substance to it. I think it's maybe kind of garnered this reputation where that's all it offers, and there's certainly some potential issues with the storytelling going on here, but it actually has a lot of interesting stuff around it. And so it's kind of how these characters deal with trauma, and the way that the story wraps up. It wraps up in this just absurdist, everything's connected, but it's it doesn't really make sense that it is, and it's kind of coincidental or a little convoluted, but yet when you watch the ending, the tone and the way it comes to it, it actually really works. And so this series is really, really fun. And I think specifically the anime production elevates it a little bit. And so I think about the opening theme song and the kind of moody atmosphere that the production makes through the soundtrack and through all of these ways, that even though the animation itself isn't the most fluid, or they're not doing so much with the art direction and things like that, I think the soundtrack and the way it captures atmosphere is really, really well done. And so I think back to this series really fondly. It does have some convolutedness. It does have some elements to the storytelling where you're like, these characters aren't necessarily the most well written, but it has this ability to just hook you into its story that is really unmatched, and it comes really in that first episode is like the perfect example of it. Like the rest of the series does kind of match that vibe. Maybe there's an episode or two that's not as good, but it really holds on to the mystery elements where it's like this girl who has amnesia. She doesn't really know what's gone on, but you've seen how violent she can be. And so it really dives into that. And there is some shocking moments that maybe feel like they're shocking for the sake of it, but there's also some value in it. The series is trying to tackle, trauma in a really interesting way, I think. And it comes through the abilities that are explored in the series, and it comes through the other main character in kind of his backstory and his relationship with the other characters, which I think is just like really, really good. So yeah, I think Elfen Lied is a fantastic series. If you haven't watched it, I think it's worth checking out to see the kind of series that really was this gateway into the more mature anime. And really it is for a lot of people. I think every generation has series like these where it's like you come across a series that its goal is to just kind of challenge what you think animation can be, and that's definitely what this show I think does for a lot of people who maybe watched just shonen series before that, and it's like, well, the violence can actually be a lot more in your face and a little bit darker, and that darkness is like just everywhere in this show, but in kind of a fun way. And when you go back to it, maybe it doesn't quite have the level that the truly great series do, but it's one that I'm so happy I watched. And really, like, there are scenes in it that I find genuinely devastating or chilling. And so because of that, it kind of lands here on 49. It was an important step in my journey of watching anime, and a series that I do think has merit, even if it's not, when you first come across it, you're like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, I can't believe, like, I didn't know anime could do this, and maybe it doesn't quite reach that level, but I think it's really good and fun. And honestly, you see it as more fun, I think, when you return to it. So I think it's just a really fun series. So that's number 49. We can move to 48, which is Yu Yu Hakusho, and this almost feels a little low for me. I think Yu Yu Hakusho is fantastic, and so Yu Yu Hakusho is the first manga, or the first longer serialized manga that Togashi made. Obviously he'd go on to do Hunter x Hunter. And it's a long-running series that starts out where Yusuke is killed in an act of kindness, and he becomes a ghost, and then he gets involved in the spirit world, and it kind of starts as a Ghost of the Week type series, and then transforms into these greater plots later on. I think the most kind of synonymous part of this series is the Dark Tournament, which is one of the best tournament arcs in all of anime, and it really is born of the era of the 90s, that it was made. And so for me, Yu Yu Hakusho is actually the series I typically cite as my first anime. It really is either Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball Z, or Inuyasha. Those are the three that I kind of have memories of all around the same time. But I always kind of cite Yu Yu Hakusho as, for me, feeling like the one that I really watched first, even though I got more into Dragon Ball Z pretty quickly after that. And so I watched it a lot growing up, and then I revisited the series in college. And so I've got kind of both extremes where there's just like seeing the characters evokes an immense amount of nostalgia for me. But on top of that, there is so much great stuff going on with Yu Yu Hakusho. I think the first kind of part of the series, there's just like a lot of fun weekly shonen vibes, right? Like Monster of the Week, you're kind of getting to know the characters, and it kind of brings together specifically these four characters that you see here that are so iconic with the series. They're actually are introduced in like really fun ways where they often, Hiei kind of comes in as a villain type character, and then they kind of befriend each other, and that's really fun. But I do think the Dark Tournament is where the series elevates itself as a series that's able to stand the test of time, at least so far. And so the Dark Tournament really shows off Togashi's character writing, and it comes through the ability to write interesting and nuanced characters who maybe are only on screen for a short amount of time. He really takes Yusuke to a different level as a protagonist, where he's not just this delinquent who's kind of nice actually, but he actually has a lot he's going through in this arc, and it totally is just like an example of really, really great prime shonen storytelling, and that continues for the arcs afterwards. Of course, the thing that I think a lot of people feel is that the series kind of was ended a bit abruptly and early, which I definitely do feel similarly, and is a reason that it's maybe a little lower on this list than some other big shonen series. And I do feel some of the Monster of the Week elements, there are just moments in this show, I've not read the manga, that kind of feel like they drag a little bit, and in terms of, the modern, almost more refined storytelling that comes after, and inspired by shows like Yu Yu Hakusho, I gravitate to a little bit more. But the anime has such a charm to it. It's such a 90s charm, right? Like, it is even more than Dragon Ball Z. It's like the series. If I want to kind of evoke that nostalgia, I'll throw on some Yu Yu Hakusho clips, and it really provides that. And so I think the storytelling here is really great. There's a lot of really subtle character development that goes on, and just like how they all interact with each other, which is just like, a signature of Togashi's style. And honestly, some of Yu Yu Hakusho could be overshined by, my love of Hunter x Hunter, and that there's another level that I think he reaches as a mangaka, and at least is translated through the anime adaptations. But yeah, I think Yu Yu Hakusho is fantastic, and it's one of those series that I do think if you haven't seen it, you'll definitely get value from going back and watching. And it might be a little hard, like as fun as the beginning of the series is, and kind of how it brings Yusuke into the world of Spirit Detective, and how he kind of, starts to befriend some of the group. There are some episodes where you're like, oh, this just feels like a little whatever. It is an element of it, but I always come back to the Dark Tournament, which is actually my favorite arc of the tournament, or of the story, and I do think it's the best tournament arc. And so if you really like tournament arcs, like, then you have to watch Yu Yu Hakusho, right? Like it does it so well, and there's just like the everything when you think of this is what a tournament arc is in anime, like this is what it is. Like the Dark Tournament is that baseline for what's become such a, kind of meme in the anime community. And so yeah, Yu Yu Hakusho, I'm a huge fan of the series. Hiei is my favorite character. Like many, like that's not like a crazy take or anything. And he really is. I mean, like shonen just do that archetype of character so well. He's not quite under the same umbrella very explicitly as a Vegeta or a Sasuke, because he's not necessarily a direct rival in the exact same way, but he feels like those types of characters, very very similar. And also, like, something has to be said for Togashi's the way that he renders the characters, like they just look so iconic and they just feel of the era in a way that like maybe the Hunter x Hunter characters don't as much, because that world feels a little, it's not our world. But like Togashi's fashion sense was so good, and it's just like him and Kubo, right, who really stand tall there. But yeah, I think Yu Yu Hakusho is brilliant. I think the Dark Tournament is the peak of it. I do wish the ending was a little more satisfying, but there is so much to love here. There's so many great villains. I mean, Togashi really just knocks it out of the park, and that's one of his strongest elements as a writer. And so yeah, moving on to 47, we have ReZero, which is an interesting pick for me. I wouldn't say that when did the manga come out? I think it came out early 90s. I could be slightly off. It could have started in the 80s, but I'm fairly certain it's early 90s when Yu Yu Hakusho started. And then the anime shortly after. But yeah, ReZero, I'm not necessarily the biggest isekai fan. It's not a genre that you'll see a ton of on this list. And this is probably one of my favorite isekai stories, and so I felt it was worthy of making this list. So ReZero is, I watched it, I think, relatively quickly after season 1 came out. And it was just, a huge deal when it came out because of how it interacts with the isekai story. And so the beginning and really ReZero, when it starts, it really does, while it is him being teleported to a fantasy world, it does tackle this kind of idea that he's in a video game, because he dies and then he has to replay, like get to a certain check mark. And so it follows Subaru, who's, been teleported into this fantasy world, and things get dark very quickly as he dies and then has to redo the same thing. And then it's just, he's going through these violent deaths over and over and over again until he finally overcomes them, and then he gets to go to a new check mark. And so there's just some fantastic storytelling that comes out of that, and it's kind of that base premise that I think really works for me in a way that it adds a little more to the isekai than some other series do. So I really, really enjoy it, and it is a part of this modern movement of really making series where the readers are, in on kind of the subtext of what's going on here, where it's like, well, this is an isekai, it's really self-fulfilling in a way, but it really works, and here it's like, oh, this is also kind of like a video game, and where these characters are really referential to storytelling tropes and things like that. But I think ReZero is a really good example of how you can push that into an interesting direction. And so here it is through the violence that Subaru, the main character, has to go through, and he just dies so many times in the most violent way possible. And it really, like in the first couple episodes, it really pulls focus to that kind of thing where you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of the reality of what a character in a game would be going through. But very quickly, it kind of gets out of that gimmick and just feels tragic for Subaru himself. And I really think of there's an episode, an ending. I think it's maybe episode 16. If you've seen the series, you definitely know what I'm talking about. But it's an image of Subaru, and he's in, it's in a snowy landscape, and he just keeps dying. And the show does some really cool stuff at the end of that episode with him just like consistently dying in the same place. And he then just starts to run into situations that feel like he could never overcome them. And so that's one element, like the base element of ReZero, I think is really compelling, and I think is really well executed, especially in that first season. But the thing that kind of lifts this series into a top 50 for me is that the cast is really well put together. So it's not just the concept, and utilizing the isekai concept and like having Subaru just go through violent death repeatedly, but it is the cast of everyone else, and I think that is what makes this story really tick, and is one of the reasons it's a super acclaimed anime right now, right? Like everyone knows that ReZero's like really good. Still, the too much of the self-referential isekai parts probably holds it back from it really going up for me. But for me, the isekais that are willing to challenge the kind of tropes that we're used to, I find incredibly compelling. And so that's why I think ReZero is kind of higher up on my list, and why it makes it over, some other isekai that don't make my list. But yeah, I think also Subaru is just a fantastic character, and the way that they develop him is really interesting. So they throw you into, you don't really know anything about him in the first season. Like, he just appears, and the situation is allowed to carry it. And it's a really interesting approach to storytelling, I think, because you kind of have when it comes to an isekai story, you have a couple of options. You either really develop who they are in the real world, and then they are transported for what feels like a very specific reason to solve an issue, right? You think of something maybe like Mushoku Tensei, where it's like you don't necessarily learn all of that immediately, but you kind of understand that this character is getting a second chance. And in ReZero, you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on. And then in season 2, we do start to understand a little bit of what happens right before Subaru is transported into the different world. And it really does this cool thing where you are brought into the story through the concept, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, here's a fun fantasy world, and then he's just getting violently killed over and over again, and he has to solve these issues. Like, it just makes for a really compelling narrative on face value, and then character comes afterwards. So I think it's really clever in how ReZero tackles its storytelling, and the fantasy world's really well done. Like, some isekai, the fantasy or wherever they end up, feels a little hollow, and then other ones, it really is diving into very tropey, very like playing on very specific kinds of expectations for what we think of a fantasy series. And this has that for sure, but I think it does it really well. And I think you can see that with how the priest is handled at the end of season 1, which I think is a really fantastic fight. Everything from the production is very quality. There's nothing here that I would say, oh, this is the anime I would go to for production quality, but there's nothing that to say like, oh, this doesn't hit the mark. And so it's just like, it feels like a quintessential modern anime for me. And so I think ReZero is fantastic. For a genre that I don't love, it made me find a lot of interesting things and made me want to return to it. I haven't seen past season 2 yet, so I don't know if that will make it go up or go lower, but I've definitely seen enough of it to be like, I really enjoyed the series, and I want to get to season 3 soon. Got to recharge with some coffee here. So yeah, those are the first handful. We can move on to 46 now. And 46 is Ranking of Kings. Ranking of Kings is definitely an interesting one. So it came out, I think, in 2021 maybe it was airing, and I kind of was never going to watch it, and then all of a sudden, two of my best friends were like, "Hey, Ranking of Kings is better than whatever you're watching right now," and so that like put me off to the show. I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, I like whatever." I can't even remember. I think I was watching a live action show at the time, and they were like, "It's not as good. Like, you should be watching Ranking of Kings," and I was like, "Whatever. Like, I'm not gonna watch this series." And then eventually, I think maybe I caught the end of an episode when I went to hang out with them. I couldn't get over the mumbling. Didn't finish episode 1. That's fair enough. But yeah, so I kind of caught the end of an episode of Ranking of Kings, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should watch this. And specifically, this is just based on the first season. I don't know if there's been some sequels. Like, I haven't been super in touch because I was pretty satisfied with what I got in season 1. And the back half of season 1 maybe is a little weaker storytelling wise, but Ranking of Kings, it comes from Wit Studio. It's this really, really well done, kind of fantasy story, and it plays on traditional fantasy tropes in a way that, you know, like I talked about with isekai, that a lot of modern anime do, but it does a really good job. It's kind of like the epitome of a wholesome series where you have this kind of, you have a king who is and his heirs, which is, you know, the main character, and then another prince, and there's kind of a lot of politics actually going on in the castle that is a lot more mature than the art style would necessarily lead you to believe. And so and from there's just like really solid, heartfelt storytelling where there is actually more violence and betrayal and all of these things that you come from like expect to come from a courtroom drama. That's all there actually in Ranking of Kings. But then on top of it, you have this character who is, you know, far stronger or has, you know, far more capability than anyone thinks and you would assume when you first look at him. And so there's just like some amazing stuff because of that. And, you know, him and his shadow, there's so much great banter between them. And there's just like a lot of really, really well done storytelling. Like, if you like fantasy stories, and specifically if you like, you know, courtroom, you know, drama with a king and his heirs, then Ranking of Kings is like the show for you. And it's something that I love. And so Ranking of Kings kind of scratches that itch, and it does it in just like a highly competent way. There's nothing in this series that I'm like, oh, that's the greatest storytelling I've ever seen, but there's also, it's just so well put together, and the characters are, you just love them so much. And even with some of the betrayals that happen throughout the show, they just hit so strong. And there's, you know, it continues to fold in all of these different kind of classic fantasy tropes with, you know, the mirror that you're looking into kind of for advice, and all of these things, I think is really, really well done. And it's just a fantastic underdog story in a lot of ways, that I'm just so happy that I did end up watching, even though my friends put me off to it initially. And so, yeah, I think Ranking of Kings is fantastic. I have heard rumblings, and I don't know if there is other versions of it. And I know the ending didn't quite work for everyone of season 1. And the rumblings I've heard, I think I've heard that and maybe they're just talking about the end of the first season, but that some of the later material isn't quite as strong. But even so, like, the first half of season 1 is just like perfectly executed. And it's actually one of the other things that really stands out to me when I think about this series is the production of Wit Studio. You know, this show comes out off of the back of Wit not animating Attack on Titan season 4, and And I think either later that year or the year after, this is like the one of the shows that they come out with. And obviously there's so much going on with what production different studios take on, because there's just so much pressure from these committees for certain timelines. Like, I don't think Wit Studio dropped or didn't pick up Attack on Titan because they didn't want to. But this is such a different production for them. It isn't tackling bombastic 3D animation in the same way. It actually is really leaning into this like almost chalky style of trying to convey something of innocence through the animation, and it's so well done. And so there's a really simplistic style that's trying to evoke a fairy tale essence too, and really mirror that kind of the innocence of fantasy that you kind of are entered through the perspective of the main character. And so yeah, I think Wit. It was really cool to see Wit tackle a production like this, when you're so used to Attack on Titan, and then they have the series that they come out with that basically looks like Attack on Titan on trains and things like that. This was really cool. The staff, I think, did a brilliant job with Ranking of Kings. So if you're looking for wholesome fantasy anime, with a little more to it than you might think from the poster, this is a great one to look at, I think. And yeah, I think Ranking of Kings is just phenomenal. And so, yeah, we can move to number 45, which is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And I've put together every part of JoJo's that I've seen. I am not separating them for this discussion. And so I highlighted JoJo's Part 4 because that's my favorite of the ones I've seen. I've seen the first 6 parts, and then I've read... I'm currently reading Part 7, and so I think I've read the first volume that was released in English, and I want to try to catch up to those releases of Steel Ball Run. I know Steel Ball Run is many people's favorite JoJo's part, and it's really good so far, and I could see it being my favorite even after one volume. So I have kind of a mixed relationship with JoJo's. And so also let me know what your favorite JoJo's part is. For me, it's 4 or 5. And so my mixed relationship with JoJo's is that I don't love the first parts. And not just part 1, but even parts 2 and 3, I found a little underwhelming. And so like parts 1 through 3 would not probably be close to this top 50, whereas parts 4 definitely would be a little higher on the list, and then 5 and 6 would be around this range. And so I decided to kind of put it all together because I do think the one advantage of JoJo's, not only does you get to reset the story, so if there's a part that you're not vibing with, you're gonna get something completely new soon, but it works better in its totality, I think. And when I think about JoJo's, I do have a lot of fondness for it, even if I don't have a ton of fondness for the early parts on their own. But what I love about JoJo's, and it's kind of what I think everyone loves about JoJo's, is just the creativity that comes with the abilities and the absurdity of its world building and all of that. And I think early JoJo's doesn't quite have, especially before stands are introduced in part 3, I don't think it quite matches that level. And then in part 3, it feels very like a standard battle shonen. And I think part 4 onwards is really where JoJo's hits its stride. I love the slice of life episodes in the beginning of part 4. You just have like the insanity of getting to explore new abilities while also just like getting to live in this town that's really fun. And then it flips it on its head with probably the best character in Kira as the villain, like one of the most interesting characters in the series. And so I really love part 4 for those reasons. And I think parts 5 and 6 are just like really solid. And so I really love the absurdity of the story that everyone loves. Sometimes I feel like things can come too unexplained. Like there's so much rules and nuance that I feel like sometimes I'm disconnected from the fights. But on top of that, learning about new Stan abilities is one of the most fun elements of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So even if it, for me, can kill some of the momentum of fights, it also has this really, really great ability to get me invested in trying to like figure out more about the power system. And I think that's JoJo's biggest strength. And it is the ambition of the parts, and it is the connectivity of them. Looser in some and more explicit in others when you have characters who are reoccurring, I think is just really fantastic. And it's such a different, especially outside of part three, which I feel it feels a little safe and standard to me for what JoJo's typically is. The best JoJo parts are this totally off the walls story in the framework of a shonen battle series, and I think that's what's really, really fun about JoJo's. So yeah, I think part four is fantastic. I really do like slice of life stories, and so I felt that that worked really, really well. And but I do think that the series, has that muddled beginning and stuff. And so if Steel Ball Run is as good as everyone says it is, and I really vibe with it, this is a series that could move up. And of course, you've got part 8 and part 9 as well. And I've actually am anime only for the first 6 parts. And so that could also be a difference, because I know some of the anime are received better, or some parts are received better in the manga. And like part 6, I think, is a little underwhelming in terms of its production. In a way that like part 5 and part 4, I think, are amazing with their production quality. But it's really the ambition of JoJo's, right? It's just the insanity of every ability, the insanity of every character, and the fact that these parts are so different, and he gets the audience on board for, kind of completely different things, even when you've come to love a character or, a certain part of the cast. And so, yeah, I think JoJo's is fantastic. I don't necessarily vibe with the beginning of it as much, but I do think it really, really finds its footing once stands are introduced. Like, I think that kind of element to the story is really when Araki finds his footing as a storyteller, and it really just blossoms in part 4. It's kind of my relationship with JoJo's, but it's something over time that it's just like I enjoy thinking about it. I enjoy talking about it, and I did watch JoJo's near the end of kind of its explosion of hype at the end of the 2010s. So I'd always like wanted to watch it and just kept bouncing off of part 1. And so, yeah, for me, I wasn't kind of swept up in the hype of it. It kind of came in on the tail end of it. But I think JoJo's is really good. It felt like I had to have it on this list. And really, when I do think about the series, I think about all the parts together. I think while there are parts that I like more than others, it really does feel like one continuous thing, even though every part is so different, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you guys feel differently about that. Steel Ball Run so far feels the most different from them all. And that's really because it's like the alternate universe type of thing that's going on, where he's really giving himself some freedom to explore completely different timelines and things. But it's all the feeling of JoJo's. It's just all similar. It's hard to separate it, really, when we're talking about it in this way. But yeah, part 4 is my favorite. Let me know what your favorite JoJo's part is. Or if you haven't started JoJo's, why not? It's kind of an interesting one where it is a little intimidating. And there also is, just the crazy discussion around should you skip parts or not? Or like, should you be allowed to jump into any part? And I think you can jump into a part. Like, I think if a part comes on, if parts, 6 or part 5 is airing and you haven't really watched it, I think it's totally fair to give it a couple episodes and see if you like the vibe of it, because I think that's like a very clear-cut function of the design of the series, which is that you can hop into any part and you can have this really interesting and different experience for different people. So I actually believe that, and I think skipping parts is once you kind of get into it, if you're like, oh, I just have never seen part two, that's a little, you're missing out if you do that. And I think most people, once they watch a part and it works for them, you can kind of go back and fill it in. But it is one of the cool things about the series that I think exists, and I think purists are kind of robbing, who think you can't watch a part out of order. I actually think they're diminishing what is so cool about JoJo's, which is that it's kind of a choose your own adventure. You can jump in at any point. Um, are you making a vid out of these streams? I wasn't planning on it. There is, if I stream more, there is a chance I could join the trend of everyone who has a second channel that's like stream updates and things like that. Because the streaming does interact with the algorithm so weird, and I want my main videos to always kind of be video essays. So that isn't necessarily my plan, but it definitely could be. Maybe I could make some shorts out of it, although that probably would look weird in terms of the setup here. But yeah, it's definitely a possibility one day to kind of gather them into a more palatable, edited down version. Could be kind of fun to do on a second channel. So that's kind of it for JoJo's. But yeah, I don't know how everyone else feels about like the idea of starting at different parts, but I just feel like it's one of the cool things about it is that, oh, you don't know, like, I don't think you need to get the reference in every scene. Like, I think scenes can take on different kind of textures and meanings, even if you don't have all the lore in your head, so I don't think you necessarily need to do it linearly. And I think that's just like a fundamental part of what JoJo's is, the fact that it's these completely different parts and that anyone can hop in whenever they can. Like it's a part of the design of the story that makes it so interesting, in my opinion. And so yeah, so down to 44. We've got the first manga only on the list, Chojin X. Chojin X is done by Sui Ishida, who's the author of Tokyo Ghoul. It started serializing in 2021, and I'm not totally caught up to the series, but I'm not far behind from where it's at. It is, and I read it when chapter 1 came out. I was there that week. I was so excited to read it because I'm a huge fan of Sui Ishida. And Chojin X is this series about a character named Tokyo who gets involved in being a Chojin, which turns him into a vulture-like beast, and Chojins are these people who live in society who take on different forms and have these kind of unique abilities, and there comes a lot of responsibility with it, because either you are kind of a Chojin who protects people, or you're probably just getting into no good. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in this series. If you're compelled by the cover art of Chojin X, which is like, how could you not be? I mean, like, look at this cover. That's kind of the vibe of the entire series. Sui Ishida's a master of kind of melancholic storytelling, in a way, if that's even a word, of melancholy. He tackles these stories of identity, and and it follows Tokyo, who's a high schooler who just like doesn't feel like he fits into anything, and it's about him kind of finding his purpose. And for all the other characters, they have similar relationships. They're trying to figure out who they are, and they now have this new challenge of being Chojins. And so it also has great action, and there's a lot to the world building, and there's a lot of, Ishida always brings in horror elements into the way that he panels and the way that he, tackles the aesthetics of the story, and that's so prevalent in Chojin X. And there's some really dark moments in the series, and there's also a lot of humor. Ishida can never stray away from making things funny. And so Chojin X is a series. I actually made a video essay about it not too long ago. So if you are interested, check that out. Made it a couple months ago. It is, the only spoilers are like through the first handful of chapters, because it's just like conceptual, like this is what the concept is. Um, but yeah, I think Ishida, has potential to just go way up. Ishida is so good. And I think the thing that I really enjoy about Jojen X is his paneling. He just like loves to work in the abstract, and what's interesting about Jojen X is it's a digital. It's not published in an actual print magazine. It's published initially online and then gathered into tankobons. And so because of that, he has this really, odd schedule that he works on. Some chapters are the 20-page length, some chapters are a lot longer, and he takes his time. Sometimes you'll get 2 chapters back-to-back weeks, and then all of a sudden you'll go a month without them. So that has made it a little bit difficult to kind of keep up with the pace of releasing Jojen X, but what it's allowed is Ishida just immense freedom to take his time to do anything. And Ishida was really interested, and he talks about this with Tokyo Ghoul, and it comes in Jojen X, and it's, I think, a really important piece to when you approach Jojen X, which is that he's foregone using any assistance, and so it's all drawn by him. And that's something that he wanted to do on Tokyo Ghoul and just like couldn't, because he was in that the structure of Shonen Jump. But here he has the freedom to kind of make the story totally him, and it just like you feel that when you read it. It's a really admirable thing, and it doesn't take away from like the amazing works that all assistants are doing on basically every other manga that's being serialized. But it results in a story that's uniquely him, and it's so about character identity, and it's about discovering who you are in a world that's like very difficult and hard to understand, and that's explored through the system of Chojins and the kind of abilities that these characters run into. And just like if you read the first chapter or two, you're just hit with the kind of unique way that he approaches paneling. And so Ishida is just like a master mangaka. He's really carving out a space unique to himself as a storyteller, and it's just like his drawings and depictions of emotion are just so good. Like, and the way that the story is going and the kind of twists and turns that have happened throughout are just absolutely incredible, and I strongly recommend everyone to catch up to Jojen X as soon as you can. And so yeah, if you're interested and you want maybe a more elegant pitch on like what makes this series so good, check out my video that I made. I think it's the title something like Jojen X is beautiful, weird, and terrifying, or something like that. So yeah, make sure to check out that video. And really, for me, Jojen X, like just the kind of aesthetic that Ishida has, and you can see it right here, is just everything I look for in a manga. It's just like really works with me. And so I think this does have a chance to be a real masterpiece of manga. And so I'm excited to see where this story goes next. But yeah, Jojen X is the first like manga only. There's not a ton of manga only on this list because there's so many that's like, oh, I did go on to read the rest of the manga or go on to watch the anime. But yeah, Jojen X, incredible stuff, and hopefully one day it does get a actually good anime adaptation, unlike Tokyo Ghoul. Moving to 43, so we're nearing, we're only going through 41, so there's only a couple more here. I think we got 3 left, and number 43 is Blue Lock. Blue Lock is one that I've also read the manga of. I prefer the manga to the anime. Season 1 of the anime is fun, but there's a lot of quality left for such a series, and you definitely feel that when you watch season 2. And I've read I've read the manga through past the U20 match. I'm not caught up, but I've definitely read enough that I just know that this series is just like incredibly fun with some interesting ideas on top of it. So Blue Lock, I watched the anime initially when it came out, so this would have been around 2022, and then I read the manga after that. I have a handful of videos on the series, so if you're interested in that, you can of course check those out. But yeah, Blue Lock is this kind of pushing, it's in the vein of Kuroko no Basket a little bit, where it's pushing sports anime to the absolute extreme. And so you get this really crazy idea where Japan feels like they can't compete at the World Cup, and so they and it's because they lack goals. They lack goal scoring, and so what they decide is the new generation of athletes, they're going to mold the perfect striker. So they announce this program where they take basically every person, that can play at all, and bring them to a facility where they're going to mold one striker who's going to be the best, and the people who fail are never going to be allowed to play at the higher level, is initially how it's pitched. And so you get just like this insanity where you're in this facility where there's like these little mini games that are going on to try to mold people to be the best versions of themselves. And the kind of idea here is that the program, through high intensity and very clear specificity, you have to score goals, right? Like it's all about scoring goals. Who you have to hone your skills for that one singular goal. And so everyone kind of approaches it in their own unique ways. And it's this really interesting exploration of how that challenges traditional teamwork, and how when you expect people to play, when we get these young athletes who are just developing and could potentially go in a ton of different ways, sometimes we actually pin them into only being so good. They aren't given the same freedom to develop. They're not challenged to be, even better than normal. And so in that can maybe stunt growth. And so that's explored through some other characters in the series, not necessarily the ones that are on this poster, but you get this like really interesting, kind of dialogue with the idea that maybe sometimes our, over focus on teamwork and playing a highly specific way and can limit certain players from exploring different avenues for their game. And so when it comes to Blue Lock, they're all forced to try to play in one specific way or try to achieve one goal, but they can do that in any way possible, and they're encouraged to push themselves and steal things from other teammates and step on their teammates' toes. And the idea is that in a limited amount of time, in a very specific window, maybe you'll get to see potential that other coaches wouldn't have seen. So it's a pretty interesting take on the way that maybe when you're younger, the goal of winning every game shouldn't be over trying to see actually how good every player can become on their own, is kind of how I would distill the thesis of Blue Lock. And then it's just explored in this crazy way where it's like people are like, the characters are like pseudo-sexual for the sport that they're in, and they're, all of them become Hisoka when they're playing. It's like this really funny kind of tone to the series, and people are super intense, and they tell on the field they're gonna kill other people, and then like off the field they're like, hey, like what a good game we had. And so it's that like heightened intensity that I think makes Blue Lock really, really fun, and is like a totally different tone from something like Aoashi, which is this like a lot more grounded exploration. I view them relatively similarly. Like so far from what I've seen of Blue Lock, I enjoy Blue Lock more, but I could totally see myself, maybe liking Aoashi more down the road. They're both really, really good. And the reason I compare them is because of course they're both soccer anime, also, in similar rankings for me. but I think Blue Lock is, yeah, like it pushes sports anime in a really fun way. It's an example of how it can kind of tackle the themes of teamwork and personal growth in a totally different way. And you kind of, when you push it to an extreme, what kind of interesting, things can come from that. And so that's definitely a really key part to Blue Lock. And then post, the U20 match is a huge highlight for the story, which is season 2. And that match is, while season 2 didn't do a great job of it, it does show that Blue Lock has the chops to tell bigger matches, because a lot of the structuring is a lot of these little side quests and little challenges, and some of them are 3-on-3 games, some of them are 11-on-11 games, but they play out very differently than the typical sports anime when you think of like the progression in Kuroko no Basket or Slam Dunk or Haikyuu. But Blue Lock does show, and later on, those chops to really tackle big matches where there's like a ton of development and growth and hype moments, and it does that with some amazing characters. The Itoshi brothers, I think I'm pronouncing that right, are probably my favorite part of the story so far, which are the kind of two prodigies, and their relationship is really, really fantastic. And so yeah, Blue Lock is amazing. I'm excited to catch up to the manga. I always see like things about it, and I'm like, wow, this seems so good, and the ego league is kind of interesting. So yeah, Blue Lock is another one that I think's fantastic, and has some really interesting parts to its storytelling. So now we got 2 left, and so these are 2 fun ones that we're going to talk about. So we got 42 is Bleach. So Bleach is, one of the big 3. It's a juggernaut of anime. And of course, this channel overall leans towards the most popular shonen anime as like my favorites, and so it makes sense that Bleach would be here, right? So Bleach is a series that I definitely, out of the big 3, I came to a lot later. I watched One Piece and Naruto as they were coming out in the West, and Bleach I did not. It played a little later at night. I remember seeing an episode or 2 and just being like, it looks kind of cool, but didn't get super into it. And then in high school, I watched it, loved it, and then I've read a little bit of the manga that I started reading earlier this year, and I kind of slowly want to work my way through it, and it would be really fun to make a video on Bleach in its entirety, and kind of coming back to Bleach after so many years. Dragoned, I'm up to date on Blue Lock 2, and comparing it to Aoashi depends on what you like more. The realism of Aoashi feels better than the exaggerated parts of Blue Lock sometimes. I do totally agree with that, and yeah, I think Aoashi, I think I could definitely see myself liking Aoashi more, and they're both really, really great series for sure. So Bleach is also, it's hard to like talk about Bleach nowadays and not mention the the interesting legacy that it's had, where it's like it's often viewed as the lesser of the 3 in the big 3. Like, a lot of people think it's not as popular, and I mean, its sales numbers would agree with that, and people equate that to quality and stuff, and I don't want to do a disservice to Bleach, because I think it's a fantastic show, and I think I'm excited to read it, because I from what I've heard, and obviously Kubo is so talented, that there's some interesting differences between the manga and the anime. But of course, Bleach starts out, it follows Ichigo. It kind of has similar vibes to Yu Yu Hakusho in the beginning of the series, where Ichigo becomes a substitute Soul Reaper, where he, is kind of doing Monster of the Week things for the beginning of it, until it grows into this larger plot where he tries to free Rukia from being executed in the Soul Society arc, which is kind of the arc where the series really takes off. And the Soul Society arc, like, you can't have enough good things to say about it. And then it really develops into the Arrancar arc, and then you have, later Bleach with Fullbringer, and then the 1,000-Year Blood War that's currently airing. It is, I think Bleach has actually a lot of depth under the surface. There's a lot of really interesting imagery and a lot of interesting, ideas that lay under Ichigo and how certain things are handled that is just like so worth exploring, and people have explored it, and I'm really excited to. It's something that I didn't necessarily engage with as much, the deeper ideas of Bleach, when I first watched it, but still I think one of the things that Bleach has is there's like an effortless coolness to the series and to the way the characters are drawn and to the abilities. Like, it just like scratches an itch when someone activates their Bankai and they have a sword that turns into this like greater ability. It's just so much fun to participate in. And then you have these societal hierarchies where you really get to have fun power scaling of well, who's the strongest here, and then you get to the Arrancar who are numbered, but it's like, well, Kyora's my guy, like I think he's stronger than 4. And so there's a lot of that's like really classic fun shonen storytelling with depth beneath it. I do think there's some repetition in the way that he approaches some of the fights, and in some of the arcs, and some of the characters. The cast is so big and doesn't necessarily have the quality that I think other series of its length do. So that's maybe a couple things that hold Bleach back for me compared to some of the other longer running stories. But what I really admire about Bleach is that that quality that it has, where there's so much depth beyond just how fun of a series it is. And I always thought Soul Society was my favorite arc in it, but actually I think the Arrancar arc might be, even though it does have some of maybe those repetition issues. There's also a lot that it has that I think really raises it another level. And so I think it's a fantastic show. Ulquiorra is my favorite character in Bleach. I think he's a phenomenal villain. You also have Aizen, who's a classic big boss villain who's incredibly iconic in his own right. And I think the entire main cast is so good. I love how the story deals with grief. I think is one really, really interesting element to it. And it kind of is reflected in a lot of the power system. And I think that's really, really great. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great drama to Bleach. I think Bleach is very, very well done. I have not seen all of the 1,000-Year Blood Wars, so I can't say exactly how I feel on the ending. And I think the Fullbringer arc is actually a little underrated. I think it's a little, people were a little harsh on it. Which is, interesting. Like, I don't necessarily think it has the grandiose of the two arcs that came before it, but there is still some interesting work, and Kuo's trying some interesting things with the Fullbringer arc. And so Bleach is one that I'm excited to read through, and maybe I'll find some nuances that I didn't find previously. I don't know if it would ever really shoot up too much on this list, but I think it's part of the big three for a reason. And so that'll bring us to the final one of the day, number 41, which is in a similar vein to Bleach. And, maybe there's some themes here of what we've seen in the first 10 series here, but it's Dragon Ball Z. And so I've got Dragon Ball Z at 41. You can kind of count it with Dragon Ball as well. Like, I didn't put Dragon Ball in this list or like it more or less than Dragon Ball Z. And so Dragon Ball Z is one of the hardest to rank. There's kind of two series that I had a really, really hard time placing. So Dragon Ball Z, like I said earlier with Yu Yu Hakusho, is one of the first shows that I watched, and I fell in love with Dragon Ball Z. I have so much nostalgia for it, just like seeing all the characters here. This is my favorite stretch of the story, which I think is a lot of people's favorite stretch. So that's why I the Cell arc and just kind of the Android saga before it, I think is really fantastic. Dragon Ball Z, has that. I've read it and watched it, and I view them both similarly. Like, I love them both so much. And so Dragon Ball Z for me, it's one of those shows that you cannot remove the nostalgia for it. But also, I can't deny that there are some parts of its storytelling that I find a little frustrating. I think it's really slow. Both the manga and the anime can be really slow. And when you talk about repetition, and it's like, well, that the issue with Bleach exists, I think, in Dragon Ball Z too, and it doesn't end on the strongest note, even though I have a lot of love for some of the Buu saga. But the highs are really high for Dragon Ball Z. It is, the story that really carved out, a type of storytelling and a section of Shonen Jump that is gonna populate all 50 spots of this list. Like, you're just every week we're going to be talking about some Shonen Battle series, most likely. And so it is the OG for a reason. And on top of that, it has the Super Saiyan moment is just like a really triumph in storytelling. And so I think that is a huge reason why. And then Gohan's development in the Cell arc is as good as any development for any of these characters that we're going to talk about. And so the cast is amazing. The fights can be a little repetitive in the way that, like, I am looking for some more sometimes some potential nuance in terms of character emotion, or strict choreography nuance, or a magic system nuance that Dragon Ball Z doesn't necessarily have. It's just like really accessible in the way that it's done, in the way that the fights play out. And the best of them end with these emotional changes. But they don't all have that emotional change. And so because of that, it can be kind of hit or miss. Vegeta's my favorite character, of course, but Gohan's right there. And it's a series that I would like to return to a handful of times throughout the rest of my life. Like, there's just so much love that I have for Dragon Ball Z, and I think everyone has for it. And I think for me, it falls somewhere where it doesn't. There are, similarly to Yu Yu Hakusho, there are some parts of it that I think are better than people have given it credit for historically, but also, like, things in the future go on to be a little more refined. And so I think 41 I'm happy with that place. This list would be disingenuous if I didn't include Dragon Ball Z. Because it is my introduction to it, and I have spent so much time with it, and I can't deny when I watch certain parts of it, it evokes some really strong emotions in me. And then on top of that, it has just some really strong cutthroat storytelling in terms of development and in terms of characters who are able to overcome. And then you think about Gohan, and you're just like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. And so it's a hard one to rank, and it would be hard to make this list without it. DBZ is a tough one to rank, especially if you're from Latin America like me. It is the anime for a lot of people. Yeah, like I'm not from Latin America, but I do totally see where you're coming from, and in kind of how Dragon Ball Z is a part of especially Western anime culture, and I think just anime in general. It would be weird to leave it off this list when a clear part of the criteria for this list is my personal favorites. But yeah, I think Dragon Ball Z is amazing. It's the last series we're going to talk about this week. I think it's one that if you haven't seen, you just like gotta watch at least some of it. It has just some really strong shonen storytelling, and when you watch certain parts of it, I think the reputation that it has, when some people see it, they go into it being like, oh, it's gonna be so slow, nothing interesting's ever gonna happen, and that's just like not necessarily the case. And I think you can always read the manga. It does have a little bit better pacing, even if it still has its issues. And the Boo saga has its issues, and I think the Saiyan saga and the Frieza saga also are not perfect. I think definitely Android and Cell are my favorites. I think it's Toriyama really in a refined place with his storytelling, and there's greater arcs at work there. And so it also has great tournaments. I just got the end. Oh, what was the list? In a moment. Thanks for hopping on. We're happy to have you, and we'll all go through these again right at the end, kind of what we've done. But yeah, I think Dragon Ball Z is phenomenal, and there's so many characters I love with the cast, and I think it's really great. So we'll reset. So I've gone through my top. Started my top 50 anime and manga. Every week we're gonna be going through this list, so there'll be 5 of these episodes. And so to recap, I'll scroll up to the top here. I had number 50, Aoashi. I think it's a fantastic series. I've only seen the first episode of the anime. Really, really great, grounded soccer anime that has a really awesome twist in the middle of it that I think is really, really good. If you're not sold in the beginning, it does get better. Number 49 is Elfen Lied, the kind of classic, edgy anime. I think has some heart to it. I think there is some good stuff going on with this series, and it is just fun to indulge in edgy anime, and was such an important, gateway anime into some more mature stuff. So I think it's really, really fun. And then 48, you have Yu Yu Hakusho. This, Dragon Ball Z, and Inuyasha are one of those 3, was the first anime I saw. I typically cite Yu Yu Hakusho as the one. It just kind of sticks out in my mind a bit earlier than the others. Amazing shonen from the 90s. I've only seen the anime. While it does have some parts about it that I don't love, in the same way like we were just talking about with Dragon Ball Z. Yu Yu Hakusho is so much fun. It has, I think, the best tournament arc in anime and manga in the Dark Tournament, and just a phenomenal cast that, of course, Togashi has. 47 ReZero. I'm not the biggest isekai fan, but I love what this show did with the isekai genre and exploring Subaru through this, like, continual violence that he has to experience. The story does a lot there, and then lets the characters kind of grow afterwards. I think it's a fantastic show. 46, Ranking of Kings. Ranking of Kings is this, amazing fantasy story if you love fantasy. I usually work Dragon, thanks for joining. I usually work Saturdays. Hope I can catch the next stream. Have a great day. I'm so glad you were here. It's always great to have you in the chat. Saturdays are probably the plan for most of them, so hopefully we'll see you there, and hope you have a great day as well. Ranking of Kings, if it's a great, wholesome courtroom drama and fantasy story that has scratches all the itch for very classical fantasy storytelling, and is really, really competent. Love the first season of Ranking of Kings. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This is the collection of JoJo's. Might be a little low for some people. I really don't love the first 3 parts, but I really love the parts after that. I think JoJo's in its entirety works its best, because it is the kind of scope of JoJo's that I think works so well, and I do love the Stan power system. 44, Chojin X, the first manga only on this list. There's less manga onlys than otherwise. Sui Ishida is a master at exploring these kind of stories of identity that indulge in some horror elements and have some really interesting power systems. He really depicts emotion, these like emotional outbursts of characters going through, either something, like actually harmful, or just like really deep emotional moments really well. Chojin X is only going to go up. This manga's incredible. 43, I had Blue Lock. I think Blue Lock's fantastic. I do view it pretty similarly to Aoashi. I've made a couple videos on it, and kind of, I talked a lot about how I think it is it takes a really interesting angle into sports anime and kind of the themes within it. I think it's really, really great. Some more shonen battle series, which is going to be a lot of this list, is 42 is Bleach. Bleach I didn't necessarily connect with as much as some of the other big three. But I think it's amazing, and I'm excited to revisit the story. And I think, I land somewhere in the middle of the people who think it's the best shonen ever and the people who think it is bad and has a huge, huge fall off. I think it's just a very solid show, and it does have a lot of depth to it that maybe people don't engage with enough. And then 41 was Dragon Ball Z. So Dragon Ball Z, one of the first, like I said, ones that I came into. Hard not to place it so higher on this list. It's it has its issues, I think, in terms of pacing and certain character arcs not being as good as they could be. But man, when Toriyama hits like he does with Gohan and Vegeta at the story's peak, it really, really works. And so yeah, I love Dragon Ball Z, and it places 41 on my list. And so that's the first 10. So that's kind of it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Before we go, if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully you enjoyed my video on Tanaka that I released. Right now, we're doing the channel watch along with patrons and YouTube members in the Discord. We're watching Mob Psycho. First time I've watched that. It's fantastic. Maybe the next iteration of this, will come up later on. Fantastic list so far. Looking forward to next week. Thank you so much. And glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad I'm finally talking about these series. I've just kind of wanted to throw them out there, even if the list isn't as finely tuned as it could have been, or we're so early in streaming. It's really just fun to talk about these series, and something that over the years maybe I'll probably update again and again, because I'm always watching so many great stuff. And a lot of what I've watched within the last 18 months, there's a handful of series that are higher up on this list, which will be really fun. I'm excited to put a number to it. It's always fun ranking things. And so, yeah, the stream was really good. Definitely look forward to the stream next weekend. And also my next video essay will be on Chainsaw Man, the film. So look forward to that. Should be out in the next handful of days. And of course, thanks again to all patrons and YouTube members that really, really help support the channel. I'm excited to keep streaming. I hope to, I'm having a lot of fun just chatting with y'all. And soon enough, maybe we'll start reading some series on the channel. And then also, I definitely plan on maybe sharing some of my own writings that I've been working on. So that'll be in the near future. And so be on the lookout for that. And I guess if no one has any other questions, I'll probably call that for the stream. Thank you all again so much for watching. And, we'll see you in the next, numbers 40 through 31 will be next week. So hope you join me